Good afternoon, Doc. Thank you so much, Doc. We are very grateful for you taking time off your busy schedule to have this interview with us. As a member of Parliament for Klote-Kwale constituency and then a medical doctor, we'll be very happy to have your candid perspective on the recent fire outbreak at Kantamanto. We are very grateful for you having this time with us. I hope we can delve into our conversations now.
Certainly.
Thank you so much. So, Doc, as a member of Parliament, we would like you to share your opinion with us, or your first reaction when you heard about the fire outbreak.
Well, I think not even just as a member of Parliament, but just as a citizen, when you hear of a fire outbreak, it's something that's quite devastating. And the first question is, has there been loss of life? And this very close second question is, what's the extent of the damage? Personally, my family has been subject to at least 2 major fire outbreaks where we've had a lot of our things destroyed, in one case, everything. So I understand the level of loss that one can feel in the event of a fire outbreak. And I think my first reaction was, goodness, not again. Because the rate at which we're having fires in the markets across the country is it's getting out of hand. Even within Klote-Kwale, we have had a series of fire outbreaks in some of our markets. And, one of the markets that was, totally destroyed by fire has still not been, restored. And hearing about what happened in Kantamanto, my concern was how quickly would we be able to have an assessment of the traders who were there, the extent of damage, and probably take advantage of the disaster to actually redesign the markets and make it safer in terms of the layout and accessibility. Because when you actually visit some of the markets, the population density is extremely high. And sometimes you can see that there are wire connections that, if you really look at it closely, should not exist. And I think it comes down to monitoring what's going on in the markets in terms of whether it's illegal, electricity connections as well. But then access to the markets is another issue.
Okay.
There are times when the fire service is able to get to the scene of a fire, but they can't access the particular location because the adherence to building codes has not happened, and as a result they just can't get past. The passageways are too narrow, or there's just no way of getting through, and this actually impedes the work of the fire service to actually be able to bring such a thing under control. The extent of devastation, I think, was just gut-wrenching.
Okay.
And at a time when the economic situation in Ghana is so difficult, for me it was just these are people's livelihoods, and a lot will have to be put in, not just into that market, but into looking forward. How do we reduce to an insignificant level the number of fire outbreaks we're seeing in our markets? Because our informal sector, a huge percentage of the people who are working in our informal sector are in the markets.
That's true.
And that there are certain levels of devastation that happen, and they are not insured. We don't actually have insurance companies that really favor that sector of our economy. So I think we need to look in general at several things. Aside from the devastation to people's livelihoods, property, smoke exposure. Then there's also the issue of how do we look at creative ways to help provide some level of insurance for people who are working in the informal sector, because they are contributing as well. They're paying tax, not perhaps the same income tax as people who are formally employed, but they are paying, tax. They are citizens, and they should be able to avail of certain services that give them certain buffers in the event of a disaster like that.
Okay. So, as a medical professional, what was your first concern when you heard about the outbreak?
Obviously, the first concern was their loss of life.
Okay.
And then subsequent to that, there's the smoke exposure or injury from fire, and whether people sustained injuries and to what extent they will have full recovery from whether it's the exposure of smoke or certain injuries as a result. And I think for me, the issue is with such a situation, people's livelihoods depend on their ability to work. And there's this close connection between your state of health and your ability to provide for yourself.
Okay.
And I think from a medical point of view, that would have been another major concern of mine as well.
Okay, so one thing I would like also to look at is the immediate risks that comes with regards to health with people that are, how do you call it, in a very dense and then clumsy area like this. What are some of the health implications that has to do with fire outbreak like this?
Well, like I said, the higher the population density, the greater the risk of whether it's a spread of disease or the risk of injury in case of fire. The fact is, we don't have fire drills in our markets.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not quite sure we have fire drills performed in most buildings in this country. And even in Parliament, we don't have fire drills done. So what people don't know is, in the event of a fire, what are the exit routes, what are the assembly points? And these are key. That's what a fire drill is. And it's something that you're supposed to practice so that when it does happen, your brain is already wired to actually go into autopilot for you to just automatically go down the correct exit and assemble in a specific area. Because the essence of assembly is also to be able to account for the people who were in that particular vicinity. So I think that it's not strictly medical, it's intertwined, because there's the health and safety aspect of it. And if people don't know what the exits are, in the event of an emergency, you can have people trampling over other people.
That's true.
And you could have certain deaths or injuries resulting from a stampede as opposed from the fire itself. So these are some of the issues that, when we're looking at how we plan and design our structures, specifically the markets and other trading areas, are important to consider. Because you don't plan only for the good days. You plan with the intention of, what do you do in the event of a fire?
Okay.
What do you do in the event of a flood? You can't plan for everything, obviously, but you need to at least factor in the major things that we do know can happen into the design of a market. And then beyond that, we also need to have the enforcement of regulations and bylaws, which is in the purview of the assemblies. So, as we speak, I have not yet seen a full report, forensic report on the fire, so I cannot comment on that aspect of things, except to say that we need better enforcement of our laws, the bylaws especially. We also need to have more stringent monitoring and evaluation of these various locations where we've seen that there's an increased incidence of fires.
Okay. So in the aftermath of this event, the fire outbreak, what do you think is some of the medical supplies that people that are affected by these outbreaks need to be given?
Like I said, it's not just purely medical, it's a health and safety issue.
Okay.
So in looking at what we do within our markets, first and foremost, the planning. How do we make sure that places are accessible? How do we make sure that you don't have all these illegal wire connections that increase the risk of fires? How do we ensure that people are not using, gas cookers in specific areas, which will increase the risk of explosions or fires? Do you have specific areas that are for keeping, let's say, gas cookers so that they are not within the buildings, for example? Or and then, of course, once you've put all of that in place, then there's the important aspect of putting fire extinguishers in the markets. Fire extinguishers that are within reach and sufficient numbers to take care of the size of whatever location that we're referring to. Those are the basics. And then, of course, conscientizing the people in the market on what to do in the event of a fire. What are the escape routes? So it really is an all-encompassing approach, not purely medical. I think it's really a health and safety issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think all the aspects have been covered with regards to medical, and then the environmental aspect of it. My last question would have to do with going forward. What is going to be the advice that we give our market women, at least to follow by? And then what's policymakers, you being a member of parliament, in charge of our legislative, and then push hard for the enforcement of our laws, what do you think are some of the things that will advise our market women to go by in order to prevent such disaster from happening henceforth?
Like I said, the responsibility of this does not lie just with one group. The Assembly has the mandate, they have the laws in place to actually enforce, to make sure that people are adhering to certain regulations, certain bylaws. So I think it's time for us to look at how do we hold the assemblies accountable in the event of such things happening within their jurisdictions. Because ultimately, someone must take responsibility. Beyond the investigation, beyond identifying what the source of the fire was, who may have been behind it, it's also what are the other factors surrounding how it could have gotten out of hand, and the issue of overcrowding is something that we cannot ignore. So we need to look at how do we have creative ways of decreasing the population density in some of these areas. Is it going up a few flights in terms of the building? Or, look, I don't want to go into the details because obviously all of these things have to be factored in based on the circumstance. But I believe moving forward, the women and all the people, the traders in the markets, have to be educated on health and safety, because at the end of the day, the first responders are the people who are there. Fire service will come in. We've seen issues with response time. The first responders are the people who are there. So if you have people within the particular location who are trained on what to do in the event of a fire, in other words, guiding people safely out of the market, knowing how to use the fire extinguishers, what not to do to decrease the risk of, fire outbreaks, all of these. And it's not something that's a one-off event. It's something that needs to be done on a, fairly frequent basis. Because when you go into corporate, whether it's in the mining sector or any of these other areas, there are things that trainings are done on a regular basis, because as human beings, we can forget. And the best way to make sure that people are on top of their game is for them to practice. And so it really comes down to having a system in place where people are educated on a regular basis and trained on a regular basis. Policy must emanate from the executive, obviously. Parliament, we're there to pass the laws, but the enforcement really should be at the assembly level. You have a local government minister who has oversight over the assemblies as well. But I think perhaps from the point of view of Parliament, committees could be constituted to look into some of these issues, as well as the Public Accounts Committee, which when the assemblies come before the Public Accounts Committee to actually look into specific incidents that have occurred in the various assemblies. I think if there's a little bit more oversight and consequences, or at least sanctions that are imposed in certain cases, it puts everyone on their toes, and hopefully will protect the lives and livelihoods of those who are in our markets in the future.
Thank you so much, Doc.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your time, and we are very grateful for taking time off your busy schedule to have this section with us. This session has been very, very educative. We know our viewers out there are going to take all what you said and they are going to work with it. I know going forward, our markets are going to be a very safe place for us. Thank you so much.